Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty crucial for anyone who's ever tried to learn anything, really. How to study effectively.
Hmm.
We all know that feeling, right? You put in the hours, but sometimes, well, the results just aren't there. It turns out what feels like good studying isn't always what, works best long term.
That's a really key point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our intuition about learning, it can often steer us wrong. And that's basically what we're going to explore today.
Right. We're going to try and unpack the difference between two main study methods,
Mhm.
interleaved and blocked studying. Now, if those sound a bit technical, don't worry.
Yeah, they do sound a bit jargony.
Think of blocked studying like this.
Hmm.
Imagine you're learning three things. Let's call them A, B, and C. With blocked, you'd focus really hard on A, until you feel you've got it down, then move to B, then finally C. So it's like
Hmm.
solid chunks of time on each. AAA, BBB, CCC.
Exactly. You're giving all your attention to one single thing at a time. It feels very focused,
Yeah.
very um, orderly, and you get a sense of real progress within that block.
Whereas interleaved studying kind of mixes it all up. Instead of those solid blocks, you're switching between them. So A, B, and C might look more like maybe ACB, then BAC, then CBA, something like that.
Yep. You're jumping between the different things you're trying to learn, often within the same study session.
What's interesting, though, is that most people seem to naturally lean towards blocked studying.
Oh, definitely. It feels more organized, right?
Yeah.
Like you're less likely to get confused.
It just seems logical, doesn't it? Focus on one thing, master it, then move on. Simple.
It does. But today's deep dives is looking at some pretty intriguing research that suggests maybe our intuition is a bit off here.
So we're going to explore why students often think blocked studying is better and maybe easier to, and what the science actually tells us about which method really leads to, well, better learning.
And today we're really trying to understand how the mental effort you feel while studying shapes what you think you're learning and, maybe more importantly, whether you'd actually choose to use that method again. And to get into this, we'll be focusing quite a bit on a study where students learned about different painting styles using these two approaches.
Painting styles. Okay. So let's get into those initial impressions then. Before the students in that study even tried these methods, what were their gut feelings? Which one did they think would be better?
Well, even before they started, there was a pretty clear consensus. Students generally believed they'd learned the painting styles more effectively using the blocked method.
Right.
It just felt like the more straightforward way to, you know, absorb the characteristics of each artist one by one.
It's like maybe learning a new piece of music. You might focus just on the first few bars, get them perfect, then move on. Feels like you're building a solid foundation.
That's a great analogy. And it wasn't just about effectiveness. They also perceived that block studying would take less mental effort.
Ah, okay. Less effort, too.
Yeah. Concentrating on one thing just seemed less taxing than constantly switching gears between different artists.
Makes sense. So right from the get-go, they had this idea. Blocked equals easier and more effective. And this showed up in the study's initial ratings, didn't it? Before they'd even started studying.
Exactly. Participants rated block studying as more effective and said they'd be more willing to use it, all before actually trying either method.
Wow.
Yeah, their initial assumptions heavily favored the blocked approach on both counts. Worked better, felt easier. So that really sets the stage for seeing how their actual experience lined up with those beliefs.
Okay, so they had these expectations going in. Now, when they actually did the studying using blocked and interleaved methods for the painting styles, what was that experience like? Did the mental effort feel different?
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting. The study found a noticeable difference. When they studied using interleaving, constantly jumping between the styles of different painters, they reported putting in considerably more mental effort
Right.
compared to when they studied in block sessions, just focusing on one artist for a chunk of time.
That totally makes sense. I can just imagine having to constantly recall, okay, what makes this artist different from the last one I just saw? That feels way more demanding than just looking at, I don't know, Van Gogh's brushstrokes for 10 minutes straight. Your brain's doing more work.
Precisely. Your brain is actively working harder to retrieve and differentiate, which uses more cognitive resources.
Mm-hmm.
But, and here's the kicker, despite reporting this higher effort during interleave study, their own judgment of how well they were learning in that moment told a different story.
Okay, let me guess. They felt like they were actually learning less effectively with the interleave method, even though they were working harder.
You got it. Spot on. While they knew they were putting in more effort, they didn't read that as, like, deeper learning. Instead, they felt the constant switching was actually hindering their progress compared to the smoother feeling of blocked study.
So it's like
Okay.
that feeling of difficulty was interpreted as this isn't working well.
Exactly. This highlights a key thing. Our brains can sometimes trick us. Thinking easier means better, even when it doesn't.
So with the painting styles, it's like feeling you're smoothly getting Picasso's cubism when you see a bunch of his paintings together,
Hmm.
versus feeling a bit more, I don't know, muddled when you jump from Picasso to Dali to Magritte, even though that muddled feeling might actually be helping you tell them apart later?
That's a spot-on comparison.
Yeah.
The ease you feel during blocked practice can create this maybe false sense of mastery that doesn't always translate to better long-term recall or understanding.
Okay, so they felt like they were learning less with interleaving despite putting in more effort. But what happened when they were actually tested? What did the results show? Which method was truly more effective for recognizing those painting styles?
Right, this is the critical part. Despite feeling like they learned less, the students who used interleaved study actually performed significantly better on the final test.
Wow.
This was in the first experiment, remember, where everyone tried both methods. The test involved identifying new, unseen paintings by the artists they'd studied.
So the extra struggle actually paid off.
It seems so. The key takeaway here really is that struggle during study isn't always bad. In fact, sometimes, like with interleaving, it can be a sign of deeper processing.
That's a really significant finding. It definitely makes you rethink what effective studying even looks like. It's not just about feeling good while you're doing it.
It absolutely does. It really highlights the gap between how we feel during learning and what actually sticks. That extra mental effort with interleaving seems crucial. It forces your brain to constantly compare and contrast, leading to a more robust understanding.
And what about the second experiment? You mentioned they only used one strategy there. Did they see the same learning advantage for interleaving?
Well, interestingly, in that second experiment where some students only did blocked, others only did interleaved, the difference in test scores wasn't statistically significant.
Oh, okay.
However, the trend was still there. The scores directionally favored interleaving. The interleaved group scored slightly higher on average. We just can't say for sure it wasn't chance in that specific setup.
So maybe the benefit is clearer when you directly compare them, but it still seems like interleaving has an edge.
That's what the results suggest, yeah. It still appears to be a valuable approach, even if the statistical proof wasn't as strong in that second design.
Okay, so interleaving seems surprisingly effective, even though it doesn't feel like it while you're doing it. Let's dig into why students might get this wrong. You mentioned they seem to use mental effort as a kind of clue for how well they're learning.
Yeah, that seems to be a big part of it. Essentially, people tend to use how hard something feels as a quick shortcut, a heuristic, to judge their learning. If it feels easy, flows smoothly, like blocked studying often does, the immediate reaction is, okay, I'm getting this.
Right, this is working.
Exactly. But if it feels challenging, requires a lot of effort, like interleaved study, the reaction might be, this is confusing, I'm not learning well.
So effort becomes this mental shortcut, but it's not always pointing the right way for effective learning.
Precisely. The study found that the more effort students felt they were putting in, the less they felt like they were actually learning. And that was true for both block and interleave study.
Huh. That's almost the opposite of what actually happens with interleaving, where more effort seems to lead to better results down the line.
It is. And this lower feeling of learning during interleaved practice, it had a real consequence. It negatively affected how effective students thought the strategy was.
Okay.
And importantly, how willing they were to use it again. They were just less keen on choosing a method that made them feel like they weren't making good progress, even if objectively it was more beneficial.
And you said this link between effort and perceived effectiveness was even stronger when they could directly compare the two methods in experiment one.
Yes, exactly. In that first experiment where they experienced both strategies, the contrast in effort seemed to really amplify this effect. Feeling that extra difficulty with interleaving had a stronger negative impact on how they rated its effectiveness compared to the easier blocked method.
This is really valuable stuff. It feels like our immediate gut feeling during studying can really cloud our judgment about what's actually sticking long term. So,
Mhm.
is there anything that helps overcome this bias? Did this study look at giving feedback?
It did, yeah. In both experiments, some students got feedback after the test. This feedback told them about the mental effort they'd reported, how well they thought they learned, and crucially, their actual test scores.
Okay.
In Experiment 1, they saw this broken down for both blocked and interleaved. In Experiment 2, it was just for the one method they used.
And did seeing the actual results change their minds about interleave studying?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
The feedback did have a positive effect. When students saw the data, saw that they actually performed better, or at least similarly, with interleaving despite it feeling harder, they started to see it as more effective.
Ah, good.
And they also expressed a greater willingness to use it in the future. So it suggested just making people aware of this disconnect between feeling and result can start to shift perceptions.
That's encouraging. Showing students the proof in the pudding, so to speak, helps them value methods that might feel tougher initially.
It is encouraging, but there's a nuance here. The study also found that even with this feedback showing the benefits, students didn't suddenly start overwhelmingly preferring interleaving over blocked studying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, their opinions became more positive towards interleaving for sure, but it wasn't like a complete flip where they all suddenly wanted to ditch blocked study.
That's fascinating. Even when the data showed it worked better, there was still some resistance or hesitation.
Exactly. In the detailed analysis of Experiment 1, even the students who clearly performed better with interleaving didn't end up significantly favoring it more after getting the feedback.
Wow.
And in Experiment 2, while those who got feedback after interleaving were more likely to say they'd choose it over blocked in the future, it wasn't a massive shift. It really underscores how powerful those immediate feelings of ease and fluency are in shaping our choices.
So even with hard evidence, that initial feeling of difficulty leaves a strong impression. It's like we're almost wired to prefer the path that feels smoother, even if it's not ultimately getting us where we want to go as effectively.
That seems to be a very strong influence, yeah. It's a real challenge for effective learning.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up for our listeners. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive into interleaved versus blocked studying and this whole idea about mental effort?
Well, I think the biggest thing, the most important insight, is that how well you feel you're learning right now isn't always the best guide.
Right. That feeling can be misleading.
Definitely. The ease you might feel with block studying can be, frankly, deceptive. While that initial challenge, that struggle with interleaved practice, that's often a sign you're actually engaging more deeply. It's what some call a desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty. I like that. It reframes the struggle, doesn't it? It's like your brain getting a better workout, even if it feels a bit harder at the time.
Precisely. So the message isn't to avoid things that feel effortful. Don't automatically assume high effort means you're doing it wrong or it's ineffective. In many cases, especially with things like interleaving, it's actually a sign you're working hard to distinguish concepts, which strengthens your understanding.
And for listeners wanting to learn effectively, maybe quickly, but also thoroughly, without feeling totally overwhelmed, this is key. That slightly more challenged feeling when you switch topics, that might just be part of the process for deeper, longer-lasting learning.
Absolutely. Just being aware of this bias, this tendency to favor what feels easy, can help. You can then make a conscious choice to try more effective strategies, like interleaving, even if they feel a bit tougher up front. It's about knowing that a bit of initial discomfort can lead to bigger gains later.
So the big message is, don't let that feeling of effort alone dictate your study choices. Pause and think.
Exactly. Consider whether your go-to methods are truly the most effective, or if you're just picking what feels easiest in the moment.
And maybe reflect on your own habits. Do you tend to stick with one thing until you feel you've mastered it? Maybe it's worth experimenting, mixing things up a bit, especially if you're learning related concepts or skills.
Yeah, definitely. So, maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Now that you know that more effort during studying doesn't automatically equal poor learning, how might you approach your next learning task differently? Could you maybe find opportunities to integrate some interleaving, even if it feels a little more demanding at first? Perhaps when reviewing different chapters or types of math problems or even vocabulary sets.
It's definitely food for thought. Understanding these kinds of cognitive quirks, how our brains perceive effort and learning, it can be a really powerful tool, can't it, for becoming a smarter, more strategic learner. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.